Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abby.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Yay! It's Justin and
Marcus!
No more Abby. No more Abby.
No more Abby. Yeah, we fired her. She's done.
She's done for today. Actually, here's what's interesting. I did a couple different podcasts without her. And
now she's not coming back.
Well, I've been recording multiple ones. Yeah. And she was like, we have to make sure we intersperse me in some of those so that people don't think that I just left. Like, I think she's terrified that people will just think that somehow a divorce happened. And I'm just taking over the podcast. Anyways, I'm here with Marcus. You've heard Marcus before. Right?
It's true. Multiple times.
Multiple times Marcus has
You
been
probably
on
heard
this.
all the stories of how my wife and I fight a lot.
Uh-huh. And also, Marcus. Marcus.
He does know my name. We are actually friends.
We've been actually really good friends for a while now. That's true.
Yeah.
But it took a little bit to get there.
It did. And by a little bit, what he means, that is a kind way of saying. So I was close to Abby first because she was like a mentor role in my life. And I always thought, like, man, Justin seems so cool. First I think I asked Abby, how do people become friends with him? And she's like, I don't know if they really do. And I was like, okay, well, like, challenge accepted. Like, I don't know what that means, but sign me up to win someone over. And so then I literally was like, oh, I'll just become friends with him. Justin, how do I get close to you? And he was like, well, you don't really. It was like a very kind but serious, not gonna happen.
And I think it wasn't like you don't as in people don't. It was like you don't.
Yeah, it was more personal. It was like you don't as in Marcus Miller, we will not be friends. Which I had enough denial then that I was like, whatever. Watch me win you over. It was more like a challenge. I can win over anyone.
Challenge accepted.
So needless to say, if you persevere long enough, you will end up in Justin's office on a podcast with him
talking about
male friendship.
Male friendship. There it is. You know, I will say this. It has been one of the greatest gifts that you are here in my life. So, but I think that there was some development that happened for you as well.
Totally. Oh, another idea. If you can get Justin to be deathly ill, where he's bedridden,
I'm gonna poison him.
Then you can pretty quickly get into his life because he's dying.
Oh, are you sick, Justin? Can I help you? Yeah, I don't know. Anyways, well, I'm glad you're here today, and I'm glad we get to talk about friendship. I think it's really fun. There's been a real beautiful camaraderie that's been built between you and I over the last few years, and I think we'll kind of talk a little bit more about that season and what that was in the podcast. But I want to talk about real quick something about you. Can I?
Do it.
Marcus gave me the smile. It's
probably like a nerve. It's both I'm excited to hear this. Maybe it's affirming. I love affirmation. And also I'm terrified.
As a side note, whenever Marcus has gotten historically triggered, his trigger response is one of my favorite of all time. Because he begins to laugh hysterically. He doesn't.
True. It's kind of like a cackle.
Your emotional meltdown. It comes with a sense of, I don't know if it's true joy, but it's joyous for anyone around you.
For years, people would be like, "Well, I didn't know you need any help. You're just laughing." I'm like, "No, I'm dying on the inside. I may be laughing to you, but I'm having a freaking meltdown."
That is so real. That is so real. But today, one of the things that I've watched. There's been this masculine development that's been taking place inside of you. And you actually were the one that proactively had said, I want to do a podcast while I'm here with you. And I thought that was interesting because I watched historically when we first met where there was a lot of what felt more like passivity. Would you agree with that?
Totally.
Okay. That's me trying to be nice.
Yeah, thanks for making it a question.
You're a passive little baby is
the
what you were.
The best way to say mean things is with a question so that they can either agree or disagree. You kind of sucked at life, right?
Right? I mean, would you agree with that? I just wanted to see. But there was this passivity. And I have watched this evolution inside of your masculinity where you've gone from the boyhood to these levels of manhood that have been really, really cool, where you even were like, hey, I want to do this podcast. And when we came in here, I haven't planned anything for this. And who planned?
Who's the passive one now?
You came in and were like, this is the topics I want to talk about inside of this. And I thought that was super incredible.
Thank you.
So, and also as a side note, as a jump start to this friendship and masculine friendship podcast, I think that two men being proactive about life and about the relationship is fundamentally foundational for a healthy masculine friendship, where two guys are actually showing up, thinking about the relationship.
Totally.
And you've been doing that over the course of our relationship.
It's true. I am nothing if not a good pursuer. But besides that, the reason, as Justin said, that I came to him and one is like, we should do this podcast is because I meet with so many men, and often some of the biggest things they tell me is they feel independent. Yeah. They feel alone. They have friends, but they still feel really disconnected, or they have friends, but they're like, I have no idea how to be vulnerable. I could go hang out with them at the bar or watch football, but the idea that I would sit down and tell them, I feel really scared. I don't feel like I'm enough to be a dad. I don't like the deep longings in their heart. They don't know how to get there. And so they actually feel really isolated, even if they're surrounded by people. And the truth is, every heart is meant for male and female connection. And I think men are missing the masculine, deep connectedness that's meant to actually lend strength to them. And so even I recently moved. Sad, wah wah.
Yeah, no. It is sad, wah wah, devastating to the Enneagram 8 that's standing across from you, who's like, I'm just going to keep working really hard on my house and ignore the fact that Marcus just disappeared until I'm done with it, and then have a total meltdown and sob cry on the phone with him.
It's true. That did happen.
Yeah, it did
but
suck.
The point of that,
F you for working your way into my life and just abandoning me.
The point of that was not for Justin's sob story. The point of that was to say, I recently moved into a new city, a new place, new group of people. And what I see is there are men around me who are longing to connect, and they're trying to figure out, how do I do this?
Yeah, what do I do with that?
There's no framework. No one's taught me this. If anything, culture taught me, don't connect. Don't connect to yourself. Don't connect to others. Don't be honest. Don't be vulnerable. And so there's this, I can feel the longing in these men, and almost like a defeated feeling of, I want this, but I don't know what to do.
Yeah, no. It's interesting because I've had guys historically come into my office, and they'll begin to share their current pain with, say, their spouse, right? Like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling devastated with my wife in these areas. It's been going on for this many years. And then I'll ask, like, do you have a group of guy friends? Oh yeah, got a bunch of guy friends. And I start going down the rabbit hole of asking, like, what have they said, when you've talked to them about that stuff? And I get one of two answers, seemingly. Like the basic generalization is either like, oh, I haven't talked to him about that. Wait, this has been going on for the last 2 years. How close are you to friends? Oh, these are guys I've known since college or high school or things like that. And I'm like, wait, you have not had a dialogue about what's going on inside of your marriage in these areas whatsoever? And I'm like, yeah, where would I do that? People would think that was weird, or they wouldn't even know what to do with that. Or I get the other generalization, which is, they're just like, oh, your wife's such a bee. What's wrong with her? And there's actually an aggression or an intensity towards that, or an attacking, which, like, the tribal mentality is awesome, done healthfully. Like, we're going to gather behind you and rally with you. But it became more about the aggressive elements rather than, oh, what's going on inside of your heart? How are you handling this? And so there is a deep sense of loneliness for men, and they just don't know how to do it.
Totally. Yeah. So I thought we'd talk a little bit about what do you think, and we'll both talk about this, what you think culture's taught men about friendship,
right?
What their dads taught them about connection and friendship, Like I would say even for me, like with my dad, I could maybe on a hand tell you some friends he had growing up. Maybe if I cut off 3 of my fingers.
My dad too.
Where I'm like, I actually don't think I saw masculine friendship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I saw even my dad hanging out with his buddies. It was like he had kids, isolated from his friends, and fought with my mom. And I'm like, well, okay. So what does friendship look like?
Totally. And I watch if I did see my dad do something, it was guys jump into a hunting truck with their guns, go out and kill some stuff. And that was kind of it.
Totally. Which is like great if it's that and like also 5 other things.
That are included inside of it.
Totally.
Yeah. Or actual conversations that happen around a campfire instead of just like, okay, the weather, huh? Politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'd say like it's interesting. My wife and I are watching Friends again, which I'm pretty sure we've watched like 10 times. But you watch it and I'm like, the dynamic between Joey and Chandler and Ross is basically, oh, your girlfriend broke up with you? Well, let's fix that. Let's go to a strip club.
Right.
Oh, your girlfriend broke up with you? Great. I'll make fun of the pain you have for feeling sad about it. And then we'll go to a strip club.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not painting a picture of men who are honest and vulnerable. I mean, honestly, when Ross shares about being sad about his like wife cheating on him, mostly they just poke fun that she's a lesbian now instead of seeing, oh, my friend is hurting.
Wait.
Also, I just told you the story of Friends, but if you haven't watched it, you're an idiot because it's from the 90s.
I was just about to say, spoiler alert.
You can't spoil something from the 90s when it's 2021. If that's a spoiler, then you've been living under a rock, and that's your fault.
I've never watched Friends. I watched one episode and hated it with a passion.
Well,
yeah, sorry, I bursted your bubble. So yeah, no, actually, that is so real. And media wise, I was thinking about this actually this morning, not even in context of what we were going to do, but I was thinking about cancel culture and stuff. I know this sounds funny, and how there's so many things that people want to cancel, and I'm so against cancel culture. But I actually was like, why haven't men risen up to cancel the culture that paints us so horridly and doesn't ever show healthy, like I think about Family Guy, Simpsons, which are shows that I've laughed hysterically at. Those are some representations, but then I start going through all the representations.
It's
in
not
other
in
areas.
balance of the whole picture of masculinity. It's one part of the broken side.
Yeah, that we're all broken, we're all idiots, that they're and that we're all little boys trapped in adult male bodies, and that we don't actually show up and provide, protect, care about each other and other people around us. And it's like the public at large, or culture at large, keeps creating scenarios or representations of masculinity that keep us trapped inside of an ongoing cycle of hopelessness, loneliness, a shattered sense of self. Mm-hmm.
Totally. And then also culture wonders why we're not changing.
Yeah.
Well, you're not getting the thing
man,
that
you're
you
so
need.
horrible. What's wrong with you? I don't know. You paint us all out to be assholes on television.
And then you make fun of us for having emotions and being vulnerable and having weakness.
And one thing that I do, and I'll say this and I'll probably get some sort of kickback on this, but the only men that they show having some sense of emotion are gay men. There's a lot of platform of masculinity that has totally identified with the feminine self in a way that's, oh, I'm homosexual, I'm gay, I'm the gay best friend who relates to you and understands you. And all these men who aren't gay, they're just heathens, monsters, disconnected emotional lunks. And I'm actually pretty offended by that.
Totally.
That's the representation that's left. Like, oh, okay, and what happens, like, where's a representation that's like, oh, I'm a man that loves women and loves my brother and has actually healthy connection to my heart. It just doesn't exist. So
totally. As you're saying that, I was literally thinking, like, this is the reason why so many men love like war movies or like sports movies. I'm like, as a kid, I loved Remember the Titans because it is a system where people go through something hard together and get to bond. And what I actually loved, I mean, I liked sports. I played football, so it was fun for me.
Yeah.
But what I loved was the camaraderie part. Like, oh, you get to feel like you're going through something together and connect. And it is a real version of that, but there is a more real version where you get to deeply, vulnerably bond with your heart with someone else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So what do you think, like, going from what we've learned, so like this is what culture taught us, this is what most of our dads taught us, this is what we learned. Even in church, I would say people haven't been the best at being vulnerable. It can feel a different version where it's like, just look perfect.
Right.
So you don't be an idiot. Instead, be perfect.
You know what's interesting about religion and church and something else, because I'm doing a recording with some people talking about sexuality and masculine sexuality and how it's actually a really good thing and healthy thing. But one of the things that culture at large has done has said, you are not an emotional being, you are a sexual being. Right?
Oh, totally.
So then we've been defined by only sexuality. Then when men engage as that's their only option is just, I guess it's just sexual. And I guess that this is how I get connected and I get nurtured and I get cared for. So now I'm going to try to pursue only sexual experiences. Now, then men get demonized for only he's a creep. He just wants sex. Well, that he's been told by all of society that that's the only expression of connection that he's allowed. And now when he does it, he gets shamed again and he keeps trapped in this cycle over and over again. This is all I am, and then I'm bad for this. And this is all I am, and I'm bad for this. And what happens is you watch men be deeply, deeply lonely and broken and disconnected from life. And then you take that same male and you put him inside of a religious institution, right? And now he's evil for having a sexual desire, right? So now he doesn't even get the outlet of connection through sexuality. He needs to like not express anything over here. And he has to be perfect, emotionally perfect, have no problems, no issues over here. And to me, I think probably that may be one of the most painful experiences of masculinity, is to be a man inside of the religious institution, because now he's left on a complete utter island, completely 100% with no expression, no way to get some form of connection. I'm not saying that it's right or healthy for him to go outlet in a sexual way, but now he's not being given an alternative.
Yeah, it's like
he's being told to lie.
I need a weapon to protect myself. You took my weapon, so now I have nothing.
Right. I have nothing whatsoever. And I'm supposed to figure out how to do life inside of that with no alternative.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So all that to say, we've been taught a lot of unhelpful options.
Yeah.
And I felt like it'd be great for Justin and I, because not that we're perfect or have it all figured out, but I feel like we've built together and with some other guys really great friendships.
Yeah.
And so painting a picture for what that can look like, how to get there, how to create that space in friendship, which, like, for me, it was a learned skill. Like, I literally feel like Justin got to be like my dummy, where I learned how to be vulnerable, how to share my feelings.
I don't know how I feel about being called a dummy.
He was my trial and error friendship.
No,
and luckily it worked.
I'm not offended.
But
I'm your crash test dummy.
Yeah, and we both crash tested with each other, and it turned into a really great friendship.
Yeah,
I figure we can help you so you don't have to crash as much.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you go ahead, jump into that.
Okay, so for you, what were some of the obstacles for you in friendships? And maybe like growing up, what were friendships like? How did you go from that into pursuing connection?
Well, it's interesting because friendships, when I had a handful of close friends, but like say teenage years and stuff like that, they weren't deep heart conversations except for with one, my best friend Dan, and him and I actually had some deeper conversations. But I don't know that I ever knew how to actually fully talk about my pain. We would rant and rave about the things we didn't like, but I didn't know how to...
Like, didn't like in life?
Yeah, like, oh, this is bull crap, and I hate this, and this happened, and my parents are blah, blah, blah. But it was never down to the vulnerable stuff of like, oh, I'm really sad right now. I feel rejected. I feel alone right now. I feel whatever. And I watched in college, like I think about college, and again, it was kind of a similar thing that was evolving inside of that. And I don't think it was until... I don't think it was till well after marriage I got into marriage where I started saying some of that. In fact, my first experience of overcoming, it's interesting as I'm talking it out. I'm thinking about Blair, and Blair, him and I definitely had vulnerable exchanges there. I think that in the moment of pain and stuff, I don't know that was one of Blair's strengths, was for him to be able to, in the moment, talk about his pain, describe his world. It was kind of like, I'll talk about it afterwards. And I think that was around the time where I was getting a little bit better at talking about it in the moment.
So even when you were doing emotional health stuff and helping people, you were still figuring out for yourself what it looks like to be vulnerable in the moment in friendship.
Yeah. And that's something that there's I think phases of developing vulnerability. Like the fact that I could have, like there was a time where I wouldn't talk about anything till years after something happened. Then I got to a point where I'd talk about the realities of, say, my experiences months after it happened.
Totally.
Then it was like, oh, I've been working on this for the last couple of weeks, and let me tell you what the last couple of weeks has been like. And that felt very vulnerable to let someone in. But the moment of, I am right now aching inside and I'm going to call you, that started developing with Blair, but it actually had a radical increase in my relationship with you and in my emotional meltdown that I had, where my panic attacks were happening, because I was in such dire, desperate need that I couldn't hide that. I couldn't be enough for myself. I couldn't be on isolation island and kind of like, okay, I can partly repair parts of this for myself. Totally. I'm like, oh, I can't even do this for myself. I am completely incapable. And I think the relationship with self-sufficiency that I had to shatter in that season, because that was back in 2016. It's 2021 now. So that's crazy. How long is that? That's 5. Oh, we're going on almost. Well, 2017 is when I had the meltdown, but physically I was breaking down, almost dying in 2016, 2017, about 4 or 5 years. Yeah. Yeah. And what I realized is my relationship with self-sufficiency, which I believe this is what most men have. I talk about this. There's a difference between being capable and self-sufficient. Capable says I have the capacity at some level to do something, but I'm open to letting community rally around me in the midst of it and not have to do it on my own. Whereas self-sufficiency, this is how I define it anyways, says I am capable of doing this and I won't let community in at all to help.
Totally. Yeah. Self-sufficiency it's all on me. Like all of it falls onto me, versus capability is I can take ownership and there are people around me that it falls on also.
Here's the picture I get. It's like you're walking out of a grocery store and you have in your arms these big giant bags just filled with stuff, and it's really heavy and encumbering, but you can do it. You can walk all the way to your vehicle and struggle. And being capable is that you have that and someone walks up to you and says, hey, can I take a couple of those bags for you? And you go, yeah, totally. And it's a much easier walk, and it's an enjoyable, connective walk. Like someone's helping you, you're being loved, you're letting someone love you. And yet self-sufficiency is, nope. You have 10 people say, can I grab a bag?
I actually remember this about Justin. This is before him and I were friends, but him and Abby were moving, and a group of us came to help them move. And at this point, Abby was like a pastor over a bunch of us. And so she like got a clan of us. And we came over to help move. And Justin had just thrown his back out. So he was like, kind of walking with a limp, and he hated the fact that we were moving his furniture. And I was like, bro, I don't understand. Like, clearly you cannot move this couch. Like, you can barely get off the couch. How are you going to carry it? But he was in like an inner turmoil about the fact that we were moving his couch for him. And that's the difference. Self-sufficiency is, yeah, my back's thrown out, but I'm going to carry this dang couch.
It's so real.
That's funny.
So
Okay. What were some of the other obstacles that you had to overcome internally to get to vulnerability and connection?
Well, yeah, besides really getting rid of self-sufficiency, I think it was the progression of believing that I was worthy or lovable enough. Also that I was safe enough. I think that one thing that's for me personally was this idea that if I let this person close enough to have this, they're going to either weaponize the information I give them, or they're going to weaponize my vulnerability against me and somehow manipulate me, take from me. And I had to get over my hurdle of fear and self-protection. And I had to accept that, like, you know, I'm going to get hurt no matter what relationship I'm in. I'm going to be betrayed. Like, betrayal comes at different levels.
Totally.
Betrayal can be like, I give a piece of information and someone even accidentally reshares it. I'm like, oh, it feels like you betrayed my trust or my confidence in that. But it doesn't mean that it's the end of a relationship, and it doesn't mean that like someone's horrible and bad. But I was very self-protective, and I had to get over the fear that said they may use this poorly.
Totally. Which sometimes people do.
They totally.
But the reality is, and I think I also had to work through that, is like, no, there's a point where me loving myself is choosing. I'd rather face the vulnerability of what could happen than isolate and never get love in. Which
aches even more. It actually okay. Say that you have 5 sources of water all pouring into a tub, right?
Great. Sure.
And
it's the best bath ever. 5 sources of water. Is this your shower? Justin's new shower literally has like, it shoots you from every single side.
Multiple angles. But say you turn off 1 or 2 of those sources of water, that tub is still being filled. But if you shut off all sources of water, you're sitting in a tub and you're getting absolutely nothing whatsoever. And so I would rather still get sources of water and still get a bath at some point.
I mean, it's funny, but this analogy actually is perfect. Like, it's so good.
Then just sit in a tub foolishly, feeling like, I hope life changes and I hope I get clean from this scenario.
Totally. Which I think that's how I felt. Like, if something does not change, I will get no water. And I'm dying there. Like, I was aware enough of the pain that I was in of having no love that I was like, something has to change. And even if that change is painful, even if 2 sources of water get cut off, but I still get 3, that is worth it to me. And it's my responsibility to choose that the person in the tub is worth that choice.
Yeah. That was a huge part of it.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. I think some for me, in terms of things I had to overcome, and this is even like in my friendship with Justin, I grew up in a family that was, I mean, pretty codependent. That's like saying it like mildly. And I remember thinking like agreement equals love. Because in my family, if you disagreed, it'd be like, well, why don't you love me? Why don't you believe in me? Why would you turn against me? It's like mom and dad are fighting and there's a 12-year-old kid and they're like, Marcus, who's right? I'm like, oh no, I'm 12. I'm trying to eat my cereal. What do you think?
Cheerios.
Captain Crunch maybe? I don't know. But then if I was like, well, like if I use my 12-year-old logic, I think this answer makes sense. But then whoever was the opposite side that I disagreed with would either shut down towards me, remove love from me, threaten things like, well, I'm not going to buy you things anymore, or you don't get to go hang out with your friends. And so literally agreement equaled love, connection, freedom.
Which would be so, what's the word?
Debilitating?
Debilitating.
It was debilitating.
The D word.
That's one of the D words. Not the first one I think of. Debilitating. But I remember like small things, like Justin would be like, let's do this. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. Oh no. Or like asking me for my birthday, who do you want to come? And I'm like, oh my gosh, he probably likes like smaller groups. He's more introverted than me. What if I invite too many people? And I'm like, this is literally crazy.
Oh yeah.
It's my birthday and he's asking what I want to do, but I'm so afraid of disagreement because it will equal punishment and disconnection that I had to literally internally choose. That's not true. That's not real friendship. That is using control and not letting him even show up for you.
Yeah.
And so I had to face that hurdle of, it's good for me as my own person to not always agree.
What was really cool in the process of development in that is that you also didn't do that on an isolated island. So you invited me into those inner dialogues happening and let me know about it. Like, hey, can I share with you the swirl that's going on inside of me about this? And that in itself was bonding, because you didn't try and come to a solution for our relationship and how you related to it on your own, which most of us do. We go off and go, oh, okay, I got to fix this. I see there's this problem and I'll just make this relationship better by changing it. And I would have missed out on, I would have been sad if you would have been able to correct that without me. I wouldn't have felt more bonded.
Totally. Which I think when Justin was saying the phrases of vulnerability in his life, I was like, oh yeah, that's great language for what it's like, where I'm like, I don't know, high school, college, vulnerability was, I have this big secret and I'm going to share it with you. Mm-hmm. And that's like the most vulnerable thing I could ever do. This one thing happened one time, or like I watched porn and I shared it. And so now I'm really vulnerable, which those are vulnerable things, but it is different than like the one big thing versus later in life in friendships, later in life with Justin. It's like, oh, I come in, hey, I can tell I feel really scared. Like if I choose something that I think you're not going to like, you're going to want to withdraw from me.
Oh yeah.
It was a different level of vulnerability for me to come with my present vulnerable emotions.
Yeah.
Which often would literally be like, because we worked in the same office and I'd text him on the drive in like, do you have 20 minutes? I feel crazy. Or I feel like I'm swirly. Which felt scary to me. It's because it's easier. I think of kind of like my goal was to bring up like a prepackaged like gift, like, oh, if I wrap it up really nicely and if it has a bow on it, then it's easier to gift someone and they'll like it. But it doesn't really give them room to show up. It's just, here's this pretty gift. Now tell me you still like me because I gave you a pretty gift.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because whether it's about our life emotions or about the relationship that's in front of us, the vulnerability of in a moment saying like, hey, I think I feel pretty sad about what you just said there, or pretty hurt about how you just responded just now in this moment. Like that is a thing that is like no for most guys, especially when we have cultures of like, dude, quit being a friggin' baby, grow up and stuff like that. Or I'm going to make fun of you like, oh, did I hurt somebody's feelings? You know, that self-protective action. And it's one thing if there's a culture of play like that, when there's actual vulnerability that lives there and you've established like, hey, we actually know we're being vulnerable. It's another when it's actually a tool to shut down.
Totally.
Emotions.
And even like the new friend group that I'm in San Diego where we moved, it's like a pretty like punchy group, which I'm like great with. Like punchy is fun. I can dig that. But then recently one of my
You mean
friends,
punchy like jabby?
Yeah, like jabby. Like we're like playing with each other, like punching, like joking. And I could tell him like, no, he's not okay. And I followed up with him. I was like, hey, what's going on? He's like, nothing, I'm not fine. I'm like, no, you're not fine. And you're hiding behind it. What's actually happening? Mm-hmm. And so I like got him to be honest with himself. Like, oh yeah, we're in a punchy group. But when that person who I have a vulnerable friendship with in a different place was punchy, it actually affected me. I was like, yeah, you should have that conversation because that's a real feeling. And you were hiding behind your punchy joke. Yep.
And so masculine relationships are oftentimes a mystery.
Explain that.
Well, they're shrouded in hidden passive aggressive jabs and plays and pokes. And there's not a lot of directness. And if there's directness, it comes in the form of almost domination. Like a lot of times when it finally becomes direct, it becomes an aggressive intensity.
Totally.
Instead of like, but yeah, it's when I say especially it's shrouded in mystery, you don't actually really know. Like you can go for years with a friend and not actually know where you stand because they're hiding it all. They're shutting it all down.
I call it kind of being invitational. Like it's not invitational. It's not, hey, here's an invitation into what's happening inside of me to show up.
Yeah.
So when it's like punchy or passive aggressive, or I I wall off. So like some people, it's like more, oh, I just won't connect anymore. Mm-hmm. I'll just pull back from you. There's not an invitation.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've watched in relationships where people will go like finally vent and air their grief about something and be like, you never showed up for me in this. And clearly I was hemorrhaging and our marriage was falling apart. And it's like, You lived in such a punchy world of stuff that the way that you acted and hit everything communicated to me, you don't need this.
Totally.
That's not necessary. So how would I clue in? Because relationship with you is an utter mystery, because there's not invitations into your world
Totally.
as it is.
It's like throwing a party, but not sending out invitations and then being pissed people don't show
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
Like, you're mad at me because I didn't show up to your party, but you
knew
also
I was having a party.
you
Why
never
didn't you
sent
come?
me an invitation.
Well, you should just
So
know.
I literally think that is an obstacle for most men to overcome, is to learn how to send the invitation, because that feels vulnerable. To ask someone, hey, this affected me and I'm really scared. Can you tell me what you think about me? Hey, when you said that, I felt afraid that what you actually were saying is that you thought I was stupid, that you thought I was not enough. Can you tell me what you're really saying? Because that hurt me.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting talking about invitations. I called you up one day and I was having a meltdown inside of my own life of feeling super abandoned, super alone. And I remember just being like, Marcus, can you just tell me that you love me? Like, I actually created a deeply vulnerable invitation. And I was able to say, I am feeling so unlovable right now in this moment. What was that like for you to have me do that?
Yeah, I mean, I loved it. I mean, I was sad. That was not like, not a masochist. I was sad that you were having a meltdown.
Love that you were in so much pain. It was awesome.
But I think most of us actually want to show up for each other. Like,
right.
We're not, most of us are not like, no, like, get away from me.
Why would you want that from me, idiot?
But we feel incapable because it's like, you want me to show up for you and I have no idea what you want from me because you're not communicating.
Right.
So when someone calls me, that's my good friend, is like, hey, I feel like I'm not worth being loved here. Can you tell me why I'm worth being loved? I feel like, yes, this is a place I can show up. I have the tools to tell you why you're worth being loved. It's like if someone came with a map and they're like, I'm trying to get here. Great, let me look at the map. I can help you get there. But if like, here's a map, where do I go? It's like, well, I don't know. Where do you want to go on the map? And so for me, the invitation makes it to where I get to help him in that space that he's inviting me into.
And I felt so bonded and I felt so safe. And in my former self-sufficiency, I would have never made a direct phone call that direct. I would have said like, hey man, I'm having a crappy day. And that I might have got to that level of vulnerability, but to literally get down to the core, I need to know, am I lovable? Do you love me? Can you tell me that you love me right now inside of this? I don't know that. And I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything inside of this. I just don't know a lot of men that would do that because it's really terrifying.
Yeah. Which is why I wanted to actually talk through this, because I was even telling Justin, I think for a lot of us, either the picture in our head of masculine friendship is really distorted and painful, or we know that picture is bad, but it's like a blank wall now.
Yeah.
And I was like, I would love to help people fill that blank wall in with ideas and pictures of something that I actually think will bring them alive.
Yeah.
And so let's kind of talk through. So we're talking about different stories of our lives and going from independence and isolation into more connected relationships. How do people, the guys listening to this, I mean, this is for both genders, like these are tools for everyone, but we're two guy friends working through it together. How do they take steps to create healthy, connected male friendships?
Yeah, that's a good
like
question.
If they're listening to this and they're like, those are all great ideas, but I feel at A and you're talking about Z.
Right. As a side note, a thought that I was just having, which went back to something earlier. So it's just a brief bunny trail. When you ask like, what are some of the obstacles? I wanted to say, I was never modeled to me. And I think that this is the part of this conversation, because it's just like, there's nothing that we've seen. There's nothing that anyone's shown. Really, it's so difficult. So unless we have a visual representation, it would be easy to feel shame. Like, oh yeah, I don't do that. I don't know how to do that. But you shouldn't know how, because it should be something that's modeled to you and it's passed on.
Totally. Because even how we're talking about, I think in church, I was always in small groups, but the small group was either we're like shooting the shit, or it's like everyone shares that they watch porn and masturbated, and that's like the group. And I'm like, okay, I mean, those are real things. And also, but how do I connect day to day? How do I process through my pain of loneliness? How do the other things that are even driving the behavior we're all sharing about, how do I deal with those in connection?
Yeah. And so, well, your question was, how do you get to there in the process? I think my thoughts, I don't know what yours are, but one of my first thoughts is I have to begin to face my greatest fears no matter what it costs me. So am I willing every time I have a fear moment inside of my gut to face that head on and challenge it and run head first into it? And so that looks like, oh, I suddenly feel a pain about something that's happening right now, and I could yell and scream at one of my buddies, or I could talk to them, and that feels terrifying. I'm just going to start there. I can feel a part of my heart that feels terrified to be honest or to ask for something. So I'm going to keep running after where's the fear at inside of my soul when it comes to masculine relationship.
Totally.
And I think that's something that you did, wasn't it?
I would say probably for me, one of the biggest things I've had to overcome really in all of life is shame.
Yeah.
The fear of you're going to decide this thing that I'm afraid is unlovable. I'm terrified that if I share it to you, you will also think it's unlovable, which will really solidify this is the worst thing about me.
So you started to want to shatter the shame and the fear of the shame and the judgment.
So I just thought, it was just like no, I have to get this out. Like I'm going to get it out rather than have it inside.
Right.
Like it's like a sickness and it's eating me alive on the inside. And the only way to stop that is if I get it out.
Yeah. And I think that, as I'm saying this, a foundational part is always the self-awareness in order to begin to build masculine relationships, because a lot of times guys are in such denial and they've denied the pain in their life. They've denied their reality of their experiences. And it's kind of like we have to begin with even shattering the denial.
Yeah. I literally put, I can connect to me so I can connect to you. In my notes. Like one of the things that both of us in our own lives did was we started connecting with ourselves.
Yeah.
And when you can connect to yourself, you can actually bring yourself to the table.
Mm-hmm. And because it's really hard to sit down and be vulnerable when you don't know what's even going on inside of you.
Totally.
I've watched scenarios with groups of guys where one guy will say something that's very disrespectful, maybe dominating. I'm thinking of one scenario where I was watching groups of men and women, husbands and wives together, and one husband was doing something kind of annoying, right? But the other husband decides to get up because he's annoyed by him and starts dominating him and pushing him around and throws him on the ground, but with like a lighthearted laugh, disguising his frustration as anger, and keeps saying things that are really demeaning. And you're watching as everyone is seeing this guy get dominated by another man in front of his wife and in front of all these other wives. And this guy gets up after all of it. And later on, I have he's normal. He just goes back to like, ha, 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 laughing and doing stuff. Later on, I asked the guy, how did that feel? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, how did that feel having that experience happen to you? What experience? Oh, you mean when we were just kind of wrestling around? No. It was clear he was dominating you. How did that feel? He was so disconnected from his own feelings that he couldn't feel the entire room around him, how humiliated he was being. And after we talked a little bit and he started getting to the reality of it, he's like, oh my God, I felt so humiliated. And that's why I just laughed it off when I did this. And he even got down into talking about how, oh, I think it made me want to cry. What was happening right there.
Totally.
But he would have never got there if he didn't have someone helping steward connecting to himself.
Totally. Yeah. So connect to yourself, like figure out ways to do that. If you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I think I'm that guy who would have been dominated, and pretend like I was fine.
Or like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And that's just one example. There are many where it's like, oh, I am fine. I know one of my triggers from growing up is I'm fine. And I'm just aware if I'm all of a sudden telling everyone I'm fine all the time, I'm probably not fine.
I used to say that too.
Something's not okay.
I used to always say that.
But that is the self-aware part where I started learning that. And that's because I met with counselors, I had mentors, I had people in my life who were helping me. If you can't see it, that's okay. That's a protector. Get people in your life who can see it. There are people you can pay to help you become self-aware.
I think it also, it's like, it takes this moment of going, I don't want to be blind anymore.
Totally.
Like literally just the simple act of an internal declaration of, I don't want to live blind anymore to the reality of my life.
And if you're wondering how to know if you're blind, if you keep bumping into things, that's because you're blind. So if you're like, I keep hitting my head on this wall, or somehow all my friendships keep like sabotaging. Like if you're like, I keep hitting these things, that's because there's a blind spot. Go get help.
Totally. That's so good.
Another thing that I think to create connected friendships is like brutally honest. Like I had to get honesty. So good at honesty. Yeah. I would like, my natural is I'll beat around the bush because I don't want to hurt someone. I don't want to like, gosh, I sound so codependent, which I was and still am sometimes, but I had to learn to be really honest because I always think like shame hides in darkness. So any place that's not in the light, it's really easy for shame to grow. And so I'd be honest, like, hey, Justin, this is what I'm feeling. And this is what I think you will think about it. Mm-hmm. My fear is that if I share that I feel triggered by you in this area, that you're going to decide that I really am not worth hanging out with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're not worth hanging out with.
And then they would respond like that. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. But in this moment, it actually hurt. Did you mean that? That literally happened one time.
It did. Because in my playfulness, I'd be like, well, that's so absurd. Why would I reject you? Or why would I like whatever? Like, I'm like, I can't even imagine doing that. And then lighthearted play like that. And then you're like, that actually.
I think I was just like, I know you're kidding, but this may be the wrong time for that for me.
And I like that. And that brutal honesty was really helpful because in that moment, we can have really pure intentions as men. And if I don't have shame about it, like when you came back with like, oh, this might not be the moment for that. If I had shame, I'd be like, oh, you're being such a baby about stuff.
Totally.
Shame would cause me to deflect and self-protect inside of that. But if we can dismantle shame inside of our own hearts in moments like that, we can actually go, oh, I'm sorry. Normally that's okay with us. I see that it's not in this moment. Thank you for like, helping me to understand that.
Totally. Which for me, I think there's two things that. One, I think I'm actually inviting Justin in that moment to love me because it's a place where actually my heart needs love. And two, I refuse to let bitterness, even if it's small, like lingerings of bitterness, start to build a wedge in connection. And I can feel it. Most of us can feel when, I think walls went up. Even if it's like, that wasn't a 10-foot wall. That was a 1-foot wall because it wasn't that big of a deal. But I
noticed I had a little FU inside of me.
I don't want to have walls of disconnection. It's kind of, if we use like the water analogy, it's like, I didn't turn off one of the 5 faucets, but I turned it on real low. So I'm just getting a little bit of water. And if I have a power inside of me to let that wall down and receive more love, I want to do that. Those are the kind of relationships I want to have. It is a value system I've made on the inside that I will not let things go unchecked and create bitterness towards someone when I could invite them in to get more love there. Yeah.
It's interesting. I had a friend that he had hard edges in his life where it was like kind of cutting hard edges with people and even with his wife. And that didn't actually play out too well for him. But I remember like we were in a disagreement over something, right? And it was a really stupid, silly one, but it wasn't like even a high stakes thing, but there was an issue or a problem. And his spiky walls were up about things. And I received a pretty intense and kind of debilitating email that really ripped through me. And I went and found him and I was like, hey man, we just need to put our stuff aside for a second, if we could please. And I just need to share with you what's going on inside of this whole thing. And I read the email to him and I was telling him like, I feel so debilitated by this information that came through. And because of his hardness of heart and the walls that he operated in, he was like, well, maybe you did do it. Maybe it is your problem. I don't know. It's like, And the harshness came out in the moment of my biggest vulnerability. I'm like, dude, I'm being vulnerable right here. I'm trying to tell you, I need you to just show up and set aside our thing over here. And he's like, what? I'm sitting here listening to you. And he kept his walls up. And that, because and this was a lifestyle of his walls that he couldn't figure out how to bring down, and he would immediately go to resentment or bitterness if there was a problem, it ended up shattering the relationship, where I was like, I'm not safe to go to you. You have walls that become spiky really fast. Even though I know you love me, it only hurts me because in times of need, you don't even know how to bring it down in times of need. So
Totally.
Bring the walls down. Be aware of the walls, guys. What is a wall inside of me? Do I have a wall?
Yeah.
Am I harsh internally towards myself and towards the people around me when I have some sense of pain? Because the truth is, it would have been so much easier for him to just say, instead of holding walls up, bring them down, being with me in the moment, and then saying, I realize I've had walls, and these walls are because I'm feeling really hurt about the problem that we're experiencing.
Totally.
That would have gone miles for me.
Most people, if we can learn how to connect to our tender, vulnerable emotions, most people want to show up there.
Yes.
I realize that's not everyone. There are some people out there who are assholes. But the average person, if I came to them and was like, hey, when you, in this scenario, when we're talking about this thing and you made that joke, I actually felt like you didn't think I mattered. Most people are like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I thought I was being funny. And even if there was an edge from me, I would never want you to feel like you don't matter. Like most of us, if someone came to us with a real tender spot, we want to show up, but you have to give the invitation.
Absolutely. And what you realize, like people, especially guys, are terrified of creating an invitation like that because they think that a worst case scenario can happen. But it's actually really cool. The more worst case scenarios that happen with individuals, help me weed out the individuals. And it's like, oh, they don't have the capacity to do that. They don't want to do that. Great. This is not someone I'm going to keep building a life with, because if I want to have a healthy life where I feel loved and supported and I love and support other people, I need to start creating them with people who are willing to go on that journey. They may not know how to do it at all whatsoever, but they're willing to figure it out and go on it.
Totally. I'd rather have less life-giving friends than have a bunch of friends and feel dead inside.
Yeah, you'd rather have like fewer.
Yeah, fewer. Yeah. I don't want to have non-life-giving friends. That is not what I meant. Fewer.
I'd rather have just a couple of really life-giving friends than this whole group of people that I run with, but we don't feel abundantly connected and alive.
Totally. Yeah. So even another thing I thought was like taking ownership. Like I had to learn how to take ownership of my life to bond. So even like me being aware of my triggers and communicating them well to Justin, like there's literally for sure at least a year of our friendship was mostly me being triggered and coming to Justin. I think I felt triggered here. This is what's happening. This is where it's coming from. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I had a mix of two emotions. Sometimes I was like, this is overwhelming. Why are you triggered all the time? That it's not like that didn't exist. But then there was also a whole bunch of it where I was like, I am so deeply thankful that these conversations are happening, because this actually makes me feel so much safer than something stewing and then an explosion going off.
Totally. And when I say like taking ownership and sharing triggers, I was not blaming Justin. It wasn't like you did this thing and you're ruining my life and I can't believe you did that. It'd be like, oh, in this scenario, I felt like I wasn't going to be chosen. And that's how I felt a lot of my life. And I could tell it was triggering this place from growing up. So I was owning my emotions.
And what that felt, that was super disarming for me, because it was you telling me about you and not acting like I was the source of all of your pain and problem.
Yeah.
And I could feel that, like, oh, he's not here to attack me. He's here to let me know about his world.
Totally.
And it's not about I have to change everything. And there may have been things that I adjusted during that season, but I happily did, as I was like, oh, I can see that he's owning this. He's not asking me to change all of me so that he can be fine.
One that I thought of that is like a funny one. Here's the thing. Abby and Justin may be two of the worst texters I've ever met in my life.
Worst.
Like if you're like if you're out there and you're like, why do they hate me? They don't. They just don't respond to anyone. It is not a personal vendetta. It is a human quality in both of them.
I posted a picture of a text exchange between Abby and I the other day, and it said like, and it was a funny one, but the only thing that people kept pointing out was how there's 119 unread text messages.
And so it's funny. There was a season where Justin, I have independent stuff I had to work through, and he was like, it feels like you're being independent. There's more room for me to show up in our friendship. And I was like, great, watch me work on that. So then like I got triggered in marriage, and Brie and I were just like in normal marriage fight and like working through something. And I text Justin like, hey, I'm feeling this. I'm feeling anxious. Is there a time we connect to talk about it? Crickets. I was like, okay, like I know it's a bad texter. It's fine. And wait a few days, follow up. Hey, just following up. Is there a good time to connect? Crickets. And I was like, this is the opposite of what you said. This is all my fears. This is why I was independent. But instead of getting mad, or building up walls and getting bitter, I don't know how it worked out, but I called him and we talked through it. And I was like, both I own my emotions. This feels like it's proving true the part of me that's afraid.
Right.
That if I don't figure it out by myself and I invite someone in, they're actually going to think I'm too much, or they're not going to actually care about me.
Yeah.
I feel scared like I don't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
So I was honest about my real feelings, and he could meet me there. And then I also had an invitation of like, hey, and also, even if you could like, you know, like the double click heart thing, or if you could send back like, love you, I'm for you. I was still inviting him in. I could like, that kind of thing would go a long way for me to know it matters to you.
Uh-huh.
So I both shared my feelings and also had the invitation of ways I could feel loved in it.
And I thought that was really good, and I took ownership for it. The truth is that I have triggers around text messages because I do get dozens upon dozens of people texting me, and then I'm like overwhelmed with everything I need to do. And then I'll see text messages and like, for instance, stuff like that. I'd be like, I actually need to call him and have a conversation with him because it feels like there's a lot going on for him. And then I'm like, oh, I'll just call him later. And then I miss it. And then I get overwhelmed about trying to get back, and like a meltdown inside of me. And then I had to go, okay, I'm going to adjust this specifically for Marcus. Everyone else may still hate
Everyone
me.
else is the 119.
But I'm going to adjust this and be really deliberate about this style of communication. Yeah.
Yeah. And that actually made me think of something else that I am intentional in relationships. And this is a way to build connected relationships and trust, is I don't make a fake story about someone. So I like in those moments. Oh,
I was going to talk
in
about
those
what
moments,
you've done.
I would literally have like a list of like, I would make myself write out, this is the truth of who Justin is. This is, I will make myself think through all of the ways that I know he's intentionally loving me. Like I'm making new friends in San Diego as we moved. And moving, transition shakes up all the old things.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I feel out of control. I feel scared. And we've been making new friends. And I can tell that trigger of I'm all alone, no one cares about me, is being pushed. And I can see actually the people who we're spending time with, I can see them caring. And so I literally sat and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a list of every place where my friend Brett is showing up for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a list of every place where I know Justin really cares about me, even though we've talked less in this season than I thought we would because he's building his house.
Yep.
Because I'm committed to not making up a story that's not real. And I'm committed to reminding myself the truth of how someone feels towards me. Yeah.
Well, you're being really deliberate about shattering the voice of accusation.
Yeah.
The voice of accusation comes in and says, I want to divide and conquer in relationships, and starts melting things down. It creates entire scenarios inside of our heads that's really super destructive. And I think about you, because you bringing this up, it was something I was just about to bring up too, is that I felt really, really loved inside of relationship because I don't feel the immense mountains of accusation inside of you. Like I know that when there's conflict, you're coming believing the best about who I am as a person. And that's really, really, really bonding and powerful inside of relationships, because we actually start believing this person's for me. And I've done that with our relationship. Reminded myself of like, this is how much Marcus is for you. This is how much he's fought for you. This is how safe he is. This is how much he really cares. And that's created even the playing of the truth of that inside of our heads. And building a history, a deliberate history inside of us.
The truth of relationships are their ebb and flows.
They're total
like, hey, I have my own triggers, so they're going to show up, and their ebbs and flows. So like, Justin's not bad that he's building a new house and but it's like taking extra work and time. Or like, your friend's not bad for having kids.
Totally.
There are ebbs and flows in relationship, and when it changes, if we don't connect to the true story of who someone is towards us, it's easy
to vilify.
Yes.
Who they are, to deal with the pain of the change that's happening or the experience that we're having for the season. Yeah, that's so good. And I hope other people start taking that on inside of their relationships.
Yeah, everyone should do that.
And that's one thing that I suggest inside of marriages really strongly now is, and I have actually historically, when I had couples having meltdowns at each other, I'm like, I want you to go back and begin to write down all the ways that this person has loved you inside of the marriage. It's okay that there's a problem here, and we're not using it to put a Band-Aid over the problem.
It's not denial. It's just seeing the whole picture, like the truth of a whole person versus I'm looking at this one spot that's hurting me. Yeah.
What else you got on the docket here?
I did put have fun, because I do think for most people, fun is really bonding. And so even like, I think I've had to intentionally be aware, like I was really disconnected from my emotions and fun all the time to swinging to I'm really connected and I'm having hard conversations all the time, and balancing it with no, I still want to have fun. Like, let's go to the lake and swim. Let's go to the Padres game. Let's go. Like, I want to balance, because fun is a really important bonding part in relationship.
Big time. And so I like that. A lot of guys can have fun, and they just, and I, definitely don't want to create a pendulum swing of where guys just never have fun ever again. But there may be seasons where, in trying to figure out how to have the emotional side of the conversations, there'll be an adjustment where it's like, it doesn't feel as fun right now. But that's because we're doing the hard work so that we can have genuine fun that isn't laced with something that's going to kill the relationship eventually.
Yeah.
And I think this is one other thing that I wanted to bring up, to be able to bond really well, a vital component inside of every relationship in general, but it's going to be needed inside of masculine relationships, is the gift of forgiveness.
Yeah.
Being able to give the gift of forgiveness to each other. And part of it is even Marcus, saying, hey, I can see who you really are, and I can communicate about the pain I have, and then I can forgive you knowing who you really are to me.
Yeah. Another thing I thought, like, I love that. That's true. Is taking feedback, or not even feedback, like you're doing this wrong. But so in our relationship, I just like, let's be honest, I naturally am not a forward thinker where it's like, we're going to the lake. Great. I'm going to jump in with my trunks and my sunglasses and we're in.
Yeah.
But Justin is like, no. Like, where's the snack bag and the towels and the sunscreen? And it just like would not even cross my mind to think through all the things to do that would, like, if I thought through the day, what would be needed in the day, and to intentionally get those things. And so we had a few areas where those things came up, and I was like, okay, this is not a natural strength of mine.
Yeah.
Maybe not even a thing that I internally care about, but it matters to him. And so, and honestly, it did help me in other relationships. Like, it was a good skill. But like, if it matters to them, then it's going to matter to me.
Yeah. I like that when I challenged you to that and shared my heart about my experience with that, because it was vital to feel like there was ways of you being proactive in that way. Like, there are ways that I need to be proactive on my end, and these were the ways of being proactive on your end that I needed. And it feels like partnership. Like, oh, okay, I have a comrade who's joining in on this, and it's not just me trying to facilitate whatever's needed.
Totally.
And it was really cool. We talked about this earlier. Ownership, proactive ownership inside of relationships is so vital for healthy masculine friendship. And so when I say proactive ownership, Marcus even came to me on this trip and was like, hey, there's some things that I didn't communicate well in planning on how I was going to spend time with you and stuff. And I just wanted to say, I'm sorry if that threw you off or anything. And I wasn't stewing internally. I wasn't sending passive aggressive signals about anything whatsoever. It was just that there was enough self-awareness and things that you were like, this might be something that's affected him during this trip being here. I want to let you know that I'm sorry if this has affected you. And I don't think that that's something that oftentimes we as human beings, but we as men would even think about doing, is having a proactive ownership approach.
Yeah.
Which says that we care, says that we're thinking about the people around us.
Yeah.
When we're kind of analyzing how may my behaviors be affecting the people closest to me.
Totally.
That's so good. So good. To wrap this up, is there any things that you want to say to kind of wrap this up?
Yeah. My thoughts are, I would love for you to take a look at your life and think, what are the relationships like around me?
Mm-hmm.
And do I feel okay with them? Like, do I feel satisfied? Do I feel connected? Do I feel bonded? And if not, okay, Marcus and Justin gave us a lot of steps we can take to start building these connected relationships. What are a couple of those steps that I can start doing to build the life that I'm wanting in my friendships?
Yeah.
Instead of, often I think people are often asking me like, well, no one's showing up and doing the things.
Yep.
And I'm like, okay, so what steps are you taking?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll have clients who it's like, I feel alone. Okay. That thing you just shared with me, have you shared with anyone? No? Okay, great. You're going to go tell that person.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to go, I don't care which person you pick, but you're going to pick 2 people and you're going to go ask them to hang out and you're going to share that thing.
Yeah.
And so take ownership, take a couple of these steps and go do them. I don't care who the person is you do it with. I don't care. Like, you pick, that's fine. I literally, people will tell me, I hate going to men's groups. They're so blah, blah, blah. I'm like, that's fine. As long as you're going somewhere. If you are telling me you can't find anyone else, then you're going to the dang men's group. Like, you cannot live alone.
And the other thing is I do hear people whine and moan about stuff like that. You know, like, well, I am part of this thing, but there's no connection there. Or they just talk about this thing. And I'm like, then why don't you change it? Be the instrument of change. Totally. I'm not talking about barking and yelling and moaning about stuff. I'm talking about, so why don't you become the person that initiates conversations that feel uncomfortable?
Totally.
And when everyone stares at you like, what the hell are you saying? Don't talk about that. Don't get all shameful. Don't slink back. Be like, trickle that in. Let it be trickled in. Open up a dialogue. Have a gentle dialogue about like, hey, I know that I would like to see more vulnerable conversations or connections around some of these things, or talk about some of these issues. Is there a space for us to do that? Or is it okay if I share some inside of my heart? Like, face your fears of rejection. Don't be a little boy. Part of being a man, like what Marcus is talking about, is this sense of ownership of like, if it's not there, I'm going to step in and I'm going to lead. I'm going to take the helm of something. It doesn't mean I'm going to go dominate and make sure that this group has to become what I want it to be.
Yeah. Like when I moved, I just chose, I'm going to be vulnerable with people because I know I need that in relationship. So it wasn't even like, I'm not even forcing any of you to do anything.
No.
But I'm going to text you, hey, I need to talk through something because Brie and I are not meeting eye to eye and I need someone to share it with.
I'm going to model a culture. Even if I've never seen it, I'm going to try to model.
Which I'm like, no, I'm creating a vulnerable culture in my friendships. And a lot of them, I'm like, I don't think you've had this before, but I know that it's what I want in my relationships. So I'm just going to do it.
Yep. I love it. I love it.
That is an invitation for you also to pull up your pants and do it.
Where were their pants? Around their ankles? Were they on a toilet?
They were on the toilet.
You stand up off that toilet now. You pull up your pants.
And go make friends.
Oh, you guys out there listening, men and women alike, but you men that are specifically listening to this, you were made for connection and relationship.
There is hope to step out of the loneliness that you've been sitting in for so much of your life and actually feel bonded and connected to other men.
Yeah.
It exists and it's real and you get to have that life.
Yeah. Marcus, thanks for joining me, man. This is really fun doing this. I'm really glad that you suggested it. I've been doing so much work and stuff like that my brain wouldn't even have thought, hey, Marcus is in town. This is a great time to grab a podcast. So I love that you took the helm, you led something, you said, let's do this. It was really cool. Also, thanks for being my friend. Thanks for being there through all my sickness and hard times that I went through.
Yeah, it's been a joy.
It meant a lot. I've so loved not only being able to feel safe sharing myself, but watch you share really vulnerably some of the aches in those seasons. And it's a lifelong friendship that, I'm very, very thankful that I had the gift to be part of.
Thanks, buddy.
You're welcome, buddy, guy, pal. You're welcome, pal. Anyways, hey, everybody, if you got anything out of this, rate, review, subscribe, share, get the message out there, and let us know how this affected you. They can reach out to you. Also, Marcus is a life consultant.
It's true.
And if you need any consulting and want to go further into this experience, where can they reach you at? MarcusMillerConsulting.com. Awesome. So go there, and he can help you go on a journey of connecting to yourself and connecting to the world around you.
Boom.
Bye.